This is If My People Bible Reading, Part 74. We are in the book of Numbers, and we're just finishing up chapter 6. I'll start with verse 22 now. The Nazirite vows were just given, and basically the Nazirite vows, the easy thing to remember is this. Yet let your yes be yes and your no be no. All right, back in those days, they did outward things. People were responsible for what they said. Words mean things. But Yahweh had them go through 40 years of doing outward signs, outward sacrifices. And as we go through chapters 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14, and whatever of Numbers, there's a whole lot of law in here that we don't do anymore. So for the Christians, you're right. In Galatians and in the New Covenant, where Paul says we are not under the law anymore. This is what Paul's talking about. He's talking about blood, guts, and gore, and doing something where a man and woman are accused of adultery, and in the Old Testament, you had to stone them. And by the way, it was kill them both. Interesting how in the New Covenant, the Pharisees and Sadducees, oh, no, they're so much better than it. They were probably involved in all the nonsense like that. That's why Yeshua didn't have anything to do with their temple. It wasn't his. It was theirs. His temple is in you now. And when he was on earth, his temple was in his heart. And when he went into that temple, which was his father's, consecrated during the time of Solomon as his father's temple, it was his temple, and yes, he did dwell in it. But all that glory and everything left, especially after Babylonian seizure and so forth. And when they came back and built the inferior temples in Nehemiah and King Herod's temples and so forth. Notice that Yeshua never once went searching. Today we're going to take a day off and wander around Galilee, and I got some ideas where the Ark of the Covenant is hidden. Let's go look for it. Could you imagine that? Well, it never happened. So it can't be that important. The Ark of the Covenant, the heart, the whole thing is him. It's him, not this box anymore, this outward stuff. So the Christians are right about that. Well, what are the Christians very wrong in is that we are responsible for the Torah. We are responsible to hear and obey Yahweh forever. There will always be law. Torah is a forever thing, never to go away. But we are not under the condemnation of it because we hear and obey, and we put our sins upon Yeshua, and we stop doing sins, and he forgives us forever for that. He doesn't forgive us for once a week during we come to confession, or we confess to others, the next day we're right back at it again. So Christians, very wrong about that. You're supposed to know this entire word. You have to read the Old Testament to know how it was then and how the outward signs are, and then how they are now. Now, Hebrew roots, Messianics, listen up. You are very wrong too. How dare you point your finger, constantly pointing your finger, arguing over we are not under the law. Well, we're not under these laws if you go through here now. Okay, Mr. Messianic, Mr. Hebrew roots, let's go through that. Okay. So a woman comes along and she doesn't do this right. She doesn't do that right. So we have to go to chapter 5, and we have to have the priest take hands of the grain offerings for jealousy. And we have to look at the woman has to go before and drink water and do all these tests. Do you do any of that? Oh, you don't? Well, then why are you making fun of the Christians then? Wrong again. You're spending way too much time in the Old Testament, and you're not spending enough time in the New. That's where Yeshua has the newer, better covenant. The newer, better covenant. It's all over the New Testament if you just read it, instead of sitting around arguing every week about something that happened thousands of years ago, and you're trying to interpret it. You don't have to interpret it. The Word interprets itself. Try reading it sometime. I'm a little on my high horse about this because there's so much fussing and fighting among Hebrew roots today. Now, when I first was involved with them, there's 4 or 5 groups. Now there's 30 different branches, and they don't agree with anything about each other. Just one big unhappy bunch who they pretend now during the appointed times to be getting together. When in fact, gee whiz, we better watch out for those smoking marijuana and doing drugs and lots of drinking going on. Way too much heavy drinking. How about that Hebrew roots. So you got to get your act together too. And I'm not going to sit there and cover you about that. I've been there, walked the walk, and I've seen what's happening. And I walked away from it. It's wrong. Christians, you're sound asleep. You're a bunch of sheep. Get off your duff and read the word. Hebrew roots, try reading the whole book. And nothing but the whole book. So help you Yah. And here it is. I mean, just right here. When this woman did this and woman did that, they stoned her to death. Do we do that? When Yeshua comes along in the new covenant, the newer and better one, does he follow his Torah? His Torah that he gave them during that time of 40 years plus, all the way up until the time he was born and walked this earth and was baptized by his cousin, John? Well, when he met the woman with the problem, he forgave her, didn't he? And by the way, he was pretty smart because he knew that if a woman's caught in adultery and all those people stand around and he's writing, by the way, their names most probably in the sand, starting with the first adulterer who was probably standing there right in front of him, and he knew it. He did that, and he wrote it down. And why did he do that? To shame them. To shame them for what they did, because they're playing games with Torah. And that Torah is New Testament, and Yeshua is living, walking Torah. So the New Testament is full of 1,050 commands. Try reading the Bible now and then. It's right there. It's right there. Oh, yep. I occasionally get on my horse on it because the horse needs to be ridden through the middle of the camps and saying, enough of that. I just spent, it's equinox, so I went out there, and the real equinox, the real beginning of Yom Torah, not some moon thing flying around that changes constantly. And by the way, it changes because it does change where it comes in, comes out, and it also changes its speed and how close it is to the earth. Did you know that? But the sun, you can pretty well count on that. That's going to be going round and round, and you can see and follow the seasons based on the sun. And the sun is a holy thing because Yahweh made it, and it was good. Oh, goodness. And the majority of the pagan religions out there today follow the moon stuff. Not falling for that. The moons give you cycles and seasons. You know, quite frankly, I understand when the moon is close, when you're in a harvest moon, it's a good time to harvest. And when you have a good time in the planter's spring and the moon comes out, it's a full moon, it's going to pull up through the gravity. It's a physics, science things. Last time I checked, Yah invented physics and science. So yeah, I can put physics and science throughout the word. And this, you don't even need a physics science book to study it. Just study this. You'll get all of science and math and physics and Maseroth and study this. Everything you need is right there. You don't need extra books that you can sell at the dime store. And by the way, nothing's a dime anymore. So, boy, I'm having fun this time. So let's go with it. And by the way, so the Moses thing, Yeshua thing. He was pointing out to the Pharisees in the New Covenant that if the woman was guilty, fine. You know, Jesus didn't say she was guilty or not guilty. He forgave her. Nonetheless, he knew everything. And if he knew that she was guilty, then she had to have been guilty. But last time I studied on adultery, you have to have a man involved. Of course, not today. Animals, other the same sex, it all goes. Both, mix them up, multiple parties. Yeah, let's have at it. Sodom and Gomorrah. But in those days, it was mostly he and she. And that's last time you got to have a he involved. So every one of those clowns that walked off in front of Yeshua was guilty of sin. Okay. So having said that, we are no longer under this numbers. There's tons of laws in here, 613, the old, that we simply are not responsible for. A couple hundred, maybe almost 300 that I can see we don't do anymore, but we have the other ways because Yeshua didn't take away the law. He actually enforced it with harder law, such as Old Testament, don't murder somebody. Don't go out and murder somebody. That's pretty bad. Or don't kill. Okay? Don't kill. Murder is a better word. What is it we do today? What does Yeshua say? Don't even think about it. So which is the harder Torah? Mr. Christian, answer the question. To go out and kill someone and get in trouble, or to even think about it. So don't say you're not under the law anymore, meaning that. Think about it. Just think. Just read the whole word and get it versus just parts and pieces that you pick up at Sunday school and then you make the story fit what you think you're doing. All right, so now we're in chapter 7. They're setting up a tabernacle. They're going through all the tabernacle stuff and you think, oh, isn't this fascinating? Well, it is, but what is it today? We are now the temple. So when you take care of things and it explains how beautiful things are, how things are to be arranged, how many of this and how many of that, how many bones you have in your body, and how many parts and pieces of the temple. When you add them all up, gee, they're about the same. If they're not the same, they are. So that's what we're going through all these chapters that you're reading, by the way, right? Now we're up to chapter 9. Moses is still in the desert of Sinai in the first month, the second year as they came out of Egypt. And he said, have the Israelites celebrate the Passover at the appointed time. So this is a never-ending royal Torah. All this, royal Torah. And I think we're good on that one. Then the deal, here comes the deal. Moses, now we're in chapter 13. Yahweh said to Moses, send some men to explore the land of Canaan, which I'm giving to the Israelites. That's your soul. Hey, Palestinians. Hey, Iranians. Hey, left-wing, fascist, non-fascist, whatever idiots you are in the United States, and the dozens and hundreds of other countries going against Israel. Uh-oh, little problem here. It says Yahweh Almighty has given it to Israel. And Israel is all over the world, by the way, the 12 tribes, not just Judah, right? It's right there. And one of them many times, those reading the Quran and all this other stuff, that was written long after the word was written, I don't know, 800 or 900 years. Okay, so he sent one from each tribe, and one of them was from the tribe of Judah, and that would be Caleb, son of Jephunneh. Now, is that Caleb a mixed breed, so to speak? Did he come from the other 11 tribes? No, he didn't. So he's kind of grafted in, isn't he? All right. And then they went into the land. They didn't like what they saw, scared to death. They saw, let's see, verse 23. Then when they reached the valley of Eshcol, they cut off one branch. Dig this for those Naphtali people, giants of the land, the whole thing. Pay attention to what you're about to hear. Cut off a branch bearing a single cluster of grapes. Have you ever gone to a grape field? For those of you who haven't, have you ever? Okay, so you go to Kroger or you go to Schnucks or something, Lion Foods, and you get a great big cluster of grapes. That's about as close as they get. Usually they're even bigger than that in the field. 2 of them carried it off on a pole between them, along with some pomegranates and some figs. Now, let's figure that out. Was those grapes messed with? And why were they messed with? Why would you have to make gigantic grapes that weighed so much, had to be carried by 2 men on a pole? That's because giants lived in those days also, as they did before, as in the days of Noah and as in the days after Noah. There were giants in the land. Who did that? Did Yahweh make that and say, that is good, I love giants, don't you? No, he didn't make giants. He didn't make midgets. He didn't make anybody with, what do they call it, small people. He didn't make those people. He didn't do any of those people. Somebody else altered them and made them that way. Hasatan. There's Hasatan. There's Nephilims. There's the giants. There's another perfect example right there. We'll stop you there and we'll get back to the next one. I'll have some tea and settle down a little bit, okay? And the next one will be better. Blessings.